Is this on? Okay, this is on. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to IES PIC. This is a really wonderful church, don't you agree? And we have a wonderful pastor and his wife. And today was it her first time to lead prayer today in the church? So that's great. The reason why she was leading prayer is because we're talking about Esther, and we wanted the women to be involved in the service more. And we decided to do Esther because there are only two female Bible characters, and Ruth and Esther, so we thought we would do the two female Bible characters back to back. Now, with this study of Esther that we are doing in the service, the teachings that we will be doing starting today. Today I will do the introduction of the book of Esther. You will also be reading daily devotional, and you can read it online, or you can actually buy the book through our Daily Bread outside. But if you buy another book from them, they will give this to you for free, okay? So you can do that, and there's a Bahasa version of that as well. And also, I want to encourage you to take this, our Daily Bread daily devotional. This is good for you to share to your friends who may be inquiring about Jesus Christ or who may be going through some issues in their life. You can give them this as a starter for them to read something about Jesus Christ. Now, I've got a lot to share today, so I'm going to talk really fast. Before I go into the book of Esther, I want to give you a bit of history about the Israelites, okay, and where they're coming from, so that you will understand the context of the book of Esther. All right? Now, we know that the Israelites were in Egypt for 430 years, and then they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, and then they entered into the promised land. And we did the book of Judges, the study on the book of Judges. It covered for 400 years, that book alone, from 1400 to 1000 BC. The book of Ruth, which we did before this, happened in 1300 BC. So it was actually during the time of Judges. Samuel became the prophet. His birth was 1120 and his death was 1011. And David became king in 1010. So you can understand why Samuel actually wrote the book of Ruth, because he was anticipating, or he was thinking that if I would die ahead before David would be inaugurated, then actually people would know that he is qualified to be the king, even though he's a descendant of a Moabite. So it's true that he died ahead before David was inaugurated. Excuse me. Solomon became king in 970 BC. And then after Solomon died, his son came into power. And his son actually did not listen to the people. The people said, look, your father Solomon had put such heavy burden on us, asked us to pay taxes and all those things. Please lessen it. Please reduce the taxes and the burden on us. But then the son said, no, I'm gonna add to the burden. So as a result of that, the kingdom divided between northern kingdom and southern kingdom. You need to know this, okay? So when you read First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, Second Chronicles, it will tell you about the division of the two kingdoms. So Israel actually split into two. So the northern kingdom was the 10 tribes of Israel, and then the southern kingdom was Judah and Benjamin. So they divided. The reason why God allowed the kingdom of Judah to be preserved is because of David's loyalty. God wanted to honor David, and so he allowed the kingdom of Judah to actually be intact there. It was in 970 and 930 that the kingdom divided, okay? Now, so northern kingdom, Israel, which is called Samaria in the Bible, and southern kingdom, Judah and Benjamin. Now, both of these kingdoms had good kings who followed the Lord, who obeyed the Lord, but they also had evil kings. Now, as a result of the evil that they were doing, they continued to prevail in idolatry. God kept warning them through the prophets. When you look at the Bible, you read about Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. What was their task? Why did God call them? God was asking them to keep warning the people. That was their job description. Warn the people. If they would persist in idolatry and if they would continue doing idolatry, I would discipline them. And what would be the discipline? They would be taken out of the promised land and they would go into exile and they would be taken as captive by some other nation. God kept warning them and kept warning them. Eventually, because of their disobedience, the northern kingdom was exiled first, and they were exiled into Assyria. The Assyrian kingdom came and took them captive, defeated them, took them captive, and then the Israelites were exiled. Now, later on, God was still merciful to the southern kingdom because there were some righteous kings, but because they continued to prevail in idolatry, God says, I'm sorry, I'd given you enough warning, you would be exiled too. And eventually the Babylonians came and defeated the Judah, and they took them as captive. They were exiled as well. So this exile began in 608, and the exile lasted until 537 BC, when King Cyrus the Great allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem. Now, this is one interesting thing that I felt I needed to point out to you about King Cyrus. Okay, very, very interesting. So you see, the Israelites were taken captives for 70 years, and God said, before that, and King Cyrus, who came into power as a Persian king, okay, he allowed the Israelites to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the wall and to rebuild the ruins, all right? So if we look at this chapter in Isaiah's ministry was in 740 BC, all right? God had told the Israelites, the people of Judah and Israel, through Isaiah, he said, I will take you into captive, but after 70 years, I will allow you to come back into Judah, into Israel, and you will rebuild the nation again, and I will do it through my servant Cyrus. Amazing. This prophecy came in 740 to 701 BC during the time of the ministry of Isaiah, and Cyrus only came into power in 559 BC. So God had prophesied 150 years before Cyrus actually became king. This is one proof that the Bible is really God's word, okay? So we shouldn't doubt it. So even Encyclopedia Britannica talks about it. In 538 BC, Cyrus granted the Jews to go back and build the city. Now, this is something that we all also have to understand, and this has to do with Esther, okay? All of these kingdoms came into power, all right, during these times. The Egyptian, they were ruling over most parts of the world from 3000 to 858 BC, and then they were defeated by the Assyrians from 858 to 612, and then the Babylonians took over, okay? And that's when the Israelites, the 10 tribes, were taken captive during the time of the Babylonians. But then later on, what happened to this? Okay. Media and Persia, they joined forces and they defeated the Babylonians, and the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, they were taken captive during this time. And it was during this time that the events of the book of Esther took place. Now, the people were allowed to go back to rebuild, to go back to Judah and to Israel to rebuild, but then some of the Jews remained in Medes and Persia. They did not go back. So these events in the book of Esther happened between 539 to 331 BC. Later on, we saw that Greece took over, and then the Romans took over all the way until the time of Jesus Christ. The Jews were in power. Now, let's go to the book of Esther, okay? So this happened during the time of Medes and Persia. The book of Esther took place during the time of the king called Ahasuerus, but in the Bible, he's known as Xerxes. He reigned from 486 BC to 465 BC. So assuming that it is true that Ahasuerus is Xerxes, the events described in Esther began around the years 483 to 482 BC and concluded in March 473 BC. Who wrote the book of Esther? Some said it was Mordecai, one of the characters in the Bible. Because in Esther 9:20, it says Mordecai recorded these events. What events? The events about how the Jews were going to be killed by Haman, but then later on there was a turn of circumstances, and then the Jews was allowed to fight back, okay? So because he recorded those events, and it's written here, some assume that he was the one who actually wrote this book. But then when we look at Esther chapter 10, verse 3, you see here there's a quote that says, Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews and held in high esteem by his fellow Jews. It seems like it wasn't Mordecai who was writing this. It seemed like it was someone else who was writing about Mordecai. It was like an obituary, you know. It's because the book is believed to have been written after Mordecai had died and long after that. So it is believed that it wasn't Mordecai who wrote it. And it seemed like very arrogant for inappropriate for Mordecai to be praising himself in this verse, in chapter 10, verse 3, all right? So it seemed like somebody else was writing about him and putting him in such a wonderful light. Second possibility, some say Nehemiah or Ezra wrote the book, but it's not certain. So in conclusion, actually, we're not sure who wrote it, all right? So now, this is the timeline of the book of Ezra, of what happened. So if you look there, the fall of Jerusalem took place over there, and then the decree of Cyrus, and then the temple completed. So long after the decree of Cyrus, that is, he allowed the people to go back, the book of Esther actually took place. And then Nehemiah and Ezra. You can take a picture of this. This is great to look at and to go through, all right? Now, the main characters in the book of Esther are King Xerxes or Ahasuerus, Hadassah, or known as Esther, Haman, and Mordecai. Mordecai, let's look at Mordecai first, okay? Now, in 1 Samuel, we see there is an introduction about Saul, who would later on become the first king of Israel. And it says there his father was Kish, and he actually belonged to the tribe of Benjamin, all right? In Esther, there is a writing here about Mordecai. He was a Jew, and his grandfather was Kish, and he's also from the tribe of Benjamin. But see, it's not really possible that this is the same Kish as the father of, I can't go back, as the father of Saul, because that actually happened 500 years before this story. You know, David actually became king 500 years before that. So it would not be possible. This is talking about a different Kish. But what's important to note here is that Mordecai is from the same tribe as Saul, Benjamin. Please take note to that, okay, of that. All right, something is wrong. Can you help me? Go to the next slide. All right, in 1 Samuel, we see that Samuel was asked by the Lord through the prophet Samuel, you have to defeat the Amalekites and you have to annihilate them. Next slide. When Saul attacked the Amalekites, he did not destroy the king. He did not destroy all the cattle and all that. And he preserved King Agag. He did not kill King Agag. All right? He let him live. And God was angry at him because of that. Next slide. Now, when you look at this, who is Haman? The guy who was trying to create trouble for Mordecai and the Jews. He was an Agagite. You see that? The same king that Saul was asked to kill, and he preserved, but later on Samuel killed him. This is the descendant of Agagite. So you see, the story of the book of Esther is actually about enmity which had taken place long before that between Saul and the Amalekites. Now it continues again in the book of Esther. All right? So you have to understand the context of this verse before you can actually understand the book of Esther. Next. So now the question is, if Agag had been killed, how is it possible that he still had descendants? So what happened? Okay. Now when God asked, I still can't use it. When God asked Saul to destroy the Amalekites, he only destroyed the Amalekites from Havilah to Shur. So it is believed that some of the Amalekites outside of this area were actually preserved. They were not killed. All right? So that's why there's a descendant of the Agagites that still remain, and Haman was one of them. But it is actually also believed, there's a tradition that believed that Agag, because Saul allowed him to live another night or so, that he actually had another night with his wife, and there was a descendant through that. We don't know what really happened. These are just theories. Okay, next slide, please. Now, Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah who was orphan, and he took her in, and he raised her up. Okay, and it is said that she had a lovely figure and was beautiful, and that's why that enabled her to become the queen. Next. This is the outline of the book of Esther. Very quickly, the activities in Ahasuerus' court, the debauched feast of King Ahasuerus. You would look at, when you read chapter 1, you will see there's a feast done by King Ahasuerus or Xerxes. And then Esther replaced Vashti as queen. Mordecai exposes an assassination attempt on Ahasuerus. Next slide. Haman's plot to kill the Jews. The plot hatched because of Haman's hatred of Mordecai and also the Jews, because he's an Agagite. He remembered what happened to his ancestor, was killed by King Saul. And probably he found out that this Mordecai is also from the tribe of Benjamin, same as King Saul. So his hatred maybe was increased because of that. The Jews mourn and fast. And then Mordecai and Esther worked to save their people. Esther's initial banquet for the king, she made a banquet. And then Haman's mistaken notion about his status, the ironic honoring of Mordecai by Haman. You read that, it's very interesting. Esther's second banquet request, and then Haman was hung. The Jews delivered, resistance allowed, and the Jews' joy, complete Jewish victory, and Feast of Purim instituted. Review of the events that led to Purim, Mordecai honored. So that is the book of Esther. I really hope that you will read the devotional starting tomorrow. If you want the physical copy, you can actually buy it from outside. Pastor Tommy, thank you.